Welcome to this episode of Abide in Me, How Jesus Models Secure Attachment with God. This series is a survey of the Gospel of Mark, looking for how Jesus models what is now called secure attachment, which is the physiological, emotional, cognitive, and spiritual experience of what is often called salvation or regeneration or being conjoined with God or enlightenment, individuation, even becoming spiritual. Through the series, we will discover the benefits of becoming securely attached with God, which is the transformation of one's life into one of joy and satisfaction. So we come to the final story of the fourth chapter of the Gospel of Mark, and Jesus is going to provide his apostles a living lesson. Perhaps you know what I'm talking about, right? Something happens and it's a lesson, right? And I know this has happened to me a lot, and my goal is to catch it, to catch the lesson even after the fact and see if it can buoy up or support my future ability to live in the lesson as it's happening. This would help awaken me to the reality that life is absolutely seeking my present joy and that I can trust the process. But the lesson's going to have to be repeated again and again, right? Especially if I'm catching it after the fact. And so Jesus takes his apostles on the boat across the Sea of Galilee, which is notorious for becoming a dangerous place in a hurry. And that's what happens. It's the middle of the night, the high waves are coming into the boat. Jesus is asleep on a cushion in the front. And the disciples wake him up and they tell him that we were going to drown. And Jesus says, "Silence, be still." And the wind stops and there's a great calm. And then Jesus asks the rhetorical question, I guess you might say, "Why are you afraid? Do you not have any faith?" So our presumption is that Jesus is modeling his ability to be secure in himself, in his relationship with his creator, the Father, and with them, and wants to model that for his apostles. But he also, in the same moment, is actually opening their minds to this new spiritual reality that he is bringing to the world. He is this divinely sourced confidence that knows that this living experience, the experience of a parable, will bring these men into a new stage of bonding with him. So the storm blows up, and it's so bad that even these experienced sailors are terrified. And it makes sense that in their fear, they react, even with sarcasm, waking Jesus, who's asleep on the ship captain's cushioned seat, right? They're yelling, "You got us into this. Don't you care?" Jesus effortlessly flattens the waves and calms the winds. And as must have been startlingly obvious, it gets really quiet. I imagine Jesus is able to speak in a calm, even low voice, and they would all hear his observation in the form of this rhetorical question, "Are you afraid? Do you still have no faith?" This is new. The parables and miracles recounted in Mark so far have all ended very well. People walked away healed, and it was a good story. And there was even praise for the good work that Jesus is doing. And note, it makes absolute sense that this novel invitation into a deeper relationship will feel scary. The experience that brought them to this realization was a threat to their existence. The menace of death revealed the underlying emotion that drove them, as it does for all of us, which is fear. The opposite of faith is fear. The lack of faith has nothing to do with the doubts we have. Think rather of the trust you have in a person you love, the person who's most trustworthy in your life. And then perhaps you've had an experience, maybe just a moment, when that trust was threatened by some circumstance, some event, something they said, and it triggered a reaction in you. Perhaps you got angry, but that would be on the surface, of course, because below the anger, if you practice looking for it by calming the storm of emotions, you will find fear, the fear of the loss of relationship. For the apostles, this enacted parable was the first time they realized that following Jesus may cost them their lives. And there's no clean resolution to this story. They are left with this open question, still influenced by their fear. At the end, they ask themselves, who is this man we are following? What is our relationship to him? Can we trust him? So when we are securely attached, when we are spiritually awake, when we have found this mindful way of living, there are still going to be those opportunities, those living parables, when we feel threatened. And that is when we have an opportunity to see the fear that's driving us and the source of that fear. So this enacted parable is in the Gospel of Mark. It has the same use of metaphor and has the hidden meaning that all of Jesus' spoken parables have, but now it includes an experience of the existential fear all human beings have, regardless of the state of their faith. An important lesson here: an agitated fear of death, physical death or the death of our ego, is a barrier to connecting with God and others. The agitation from that fear is a barrier to our connecting or feeling secure and trustworthy of God and other people. As the simply put teachings of so many wise people, Nicole and Swedenborg, Thich Nhat Hanh, we have these desires that are connected intimately to ourselves and our stuff in the world. So we do have this love of ourself, which we need to have, and we desire to protect that. And we have this place in the world and our reputation and looking good, and we have a desire to protect that. When something happens to threaten those, there's an agitation of our mind, sometimes even of our bodies, when we can get shaky or we feel like we can't breathe, right? Or there's a pressure. And that's when it looks to us as if God is absent, that love is not flowing, right? That the universe has turned against us. Jesus asleep in the boat. Now, our premise here is that is not the case. That love is always flowing, that God is always reaching for connection, that the universe is designed to bring us joy and satisfaction in the present moment. So what is going on? We have these natural desires as part of our person, our humanity. They're supposed to be there, and that's okay. But when they're threatened, they become agitated. And we know from science, modern science of the brain, that when we become agitated like that, and our amygdala fires up and our brainstem fires up, it takes away oxygen and energy and blood from the prefrontal cortex, and it befuddles our thinking and confuses our emotions. And that's why we have to learn to relax our bodies, calm our thinking, pay attention to our breath until our amygdala and brainstem calm down. The response of people who are able to do this to these threats, people who have practiced this skill, is that they acquire more and more of a secure attachment with God, with other people, amongst the parts within themselves. This is new, right? This is a development, a spiritual development. The fear of death and loss is always going to be there. It's always going to trigger things in our minds and our bodies. But our reaction with practice can make such events an opportunity for new spiritual development. So the lesson of spiritual growth told in this story can be integrated when we go through it, when it is parabolically played out in our thoughts and feelings. The very idea, of course, of experiencing such a parable is frightening, that we would be put into a place where our physical or ego's existence is threatened. And Jesus is teaching us that when we remember that love is always present, that the universe is urging us to find peace and satisfaction, when love is pressing us to live spiritual lives of interconnection, of living in the flow along the path, of reaching out to other people, seeking connection, we're learning again and again that the peace that passes all understanding comes from establishing this relationship within us, rather than trying to fix all the external circumstances. For that flow overcomes the agitating thoughts that our fear generates. And again, I want to emphasize this, that the flow of love from within, this establishment of secure attachment that we have within, does not cause the agitation. It looks that way, but that's our view. That's not the view of the infinite, the eternal, the universe. It makes no sense to think that God would have as his operating principle to cause us pain and suffering. God is love, and it flows in unconditionally and unceasingly. That is the only premise that makes any sense in my view. So my experience in my relationships is the same thing, that I'm the one whose concerns and fears and worries and stories interfere with my relationship with other people. It's not simply what they say or do that may cause a disruption. It is my reaction to what they say or do that causes the disruption. That's my observation, and I take that as being the confirmation of this principle that love is always flowing, the universe is always on our side. There's never any disruption in that flow, but where the disruption happens is on my end, as it were. It makes sense. Of course, this is going to happen because I care about my physical self. I care about how I appear to people in the world. I do want to look wise. It makes sense, right? I do want to be a leader. I want to stand up for myself. So the lesson is that when those are threatened, when the storm arises and the waves start coming over the bow of the boat and I feel like I'm about to lose something, I want to go find and awaken myself, my remembering that the flow is happening, that love is available to me. Let's return for a moment to what Jesus does in the story, because I think it's an example of what I'm trying to say is Jesus acting from this secure bond, from having worked through whatever attachment wounds he had experienced. His father, Joseph, his earthly father, is gone from the story, and I presume that he's passed away, and maybe Jesus was young when that happened, and that would have been a wounding to him to lose his father. So those things are a part of Jesus' earthly personality. And in this moment, he goes on the boat. He, as a securely attached person, he knows he's on a journey and he has a mission and he's living from that purpose. And that's what's motivating him. That's what's giving him his sense of being in the present. He's expecting there to be a storm, you might say, that he knows that's going to happen in his life, that there are going to be these very troubling times that are even existential threats. His going to sleep is to my mind, a recognition that these natural desires that we all have that arise from our bodies, from the evolutionary force to survive, as well as from the desires from the world of needing to have things and to protect things, not just our stuff, but our families. All of that is asleep, as it were. And what Jesus, when he stands up and he says, "Peace, be still," he's coming from that place, from that assurance of his place in the world, in the mission, in the grand scheme of things. And it is an active experience of self-worth, of valuing who and what he has to offer. And he knows about the journey, and he sees his colleagues and friends being on the journey. He's connected to them. He's not abandoning them. He is actually coming from a sense of abundance, and he is not distinguishing this trial and tribulation from the rest of life. It is part of the journey. And so I think that's instructive to us to see that this is what it looks like when we are living from our secure place of secure attachment. Again, this is what Jesus is trying to model, that we are invited to sail through life, to live our lives, and then notice that in times of trouble and turmoil, we can rely on the higher power to steer our little boat through those stormy seas. God wants us to know that we are loved unconditionally and constantly. And we can experience that in our relationship with God, with our higher power, with other people. And so the invitation is to respond to this invitation to let go of fear by having a faith in the unconditional love and wisdom that is in the universe. That will give us an experience, and that experience is one of secure attachment, and indeed an eternal connection with God, with our Savior, with the universe, with our higher power. I pray this has supported your transformative life, whatever practice you have in your life. I want to thank Solomon Keel for his music, and I want to invite you to make a contribution to this work if you wish and are able through the PayPal link. And I invite you to continue to listen to the next episode. You be well.